So that's like a third.
There's maritime and admiralty jurisdiction too, which is a law of international contract.
Okay.
Equity is a law of domestic contract.
Oh, okay.
And common law is just simply you and I working it out, by having a conversation with each other, and hopefully we don't have to go into any of those other venues. Okay, so I was just giving a little outline there of the lack of a judicial system. We don't really have a judicial system any longer that has even innocent until proven guilty. So all of that collapsed into one power structure. So that's an unfortunate thing, because in a republic you have separation of powers. And by the way, there are different forms of government. A republic is one form of government, a democracy is another form of government. And we get them confused with the two political parties, which have nothing whatsoever to do with republic and democracy. They're playing mind games on us all the time. So if you think Democrats and Republicans are fundamentally different, well, they're not fundamentally different. They both believe in total government. They just go about it in different ways. They want absolute totalitarian government. They just go about it in two different ways. No, we haven't seen the shrinking of government, whether we are under a Democratic or Republican administration, ever. It's always grown larger and larger, until right now, government at all levels is 65% of the gross national product. So what happens when you're at 90% of the gross national product? What kind of political system are we in? That's called National Socialism. Sweden has a country like that, where everything's owned and controlled by the government corporation or the private corporation, which is chartered by the public corporation. So a republic is a form of government that's formed from the bottom up, from the sovereignty of the people. A bunch of us get together and say, well, we really don't like the government we have, let's create a new one. And you create it at the most very basic building block, which is local, which was county when the original state started. And then some places in the West here, the Midwest, have townships, which was a building block, a jural society. So you can build a jural society too. And then the states were formed, and then the states formed the federal government. Everybody kind of got it backwards. We think the federal government was here first. It wasn't. It was an agency of the states. And originally it was formed through the Articles of Confederation, and then through the U.S. Constitution and the Constitutional Convention, the Federal United States Corporation was created. And then Maryland and Virginia ceded a little bit of land, 63 square miles, and formed the District of Columbia. And so originally the federal was what? The seat of government for the democracy. And the other states were the seat of government for the republic, with the sovereignty vested in the people, who were citizens of what? The states. There is no citizenship on a federal level in the original vision of America.
The 14th Amendment, right?
Well, the 14th Amendment, exactly, created U.S. citizens. But you had to volunteer, allegedly volunteer into that jurisdiction, and you did so when you got your Social Security number. So, anyway, back to that original structure, because to create the new vision for America, we have to look back at what was smart about the original vision, because maybe some of that is worth keeping. Not all of it. The racism isn't worth keeping. Those things are not worth keeping. But what we can do is keep the principles that are intact. And sovereignty is the unifying principle. It is our grain of salt. I will allege that our grain of salt and that which unites human beings is that very principle, because it's the intersecting point between the internal and the external, and it's around which universes are created and worlds are spun out, where power actually can be brought into action, and action into manifestation, and the manifestation into form and structure. And so if we want to reinvent the world, then we ought to do it from a powerful sovereign perspective, as sovereign beings. And a republic is nothing more than a form of government from which sovereign beings can then create new forms of governance that are appropriate to that body of people, whoever they might be. And we can start doing those experiments locally by organizing yourself in your own little mini republics. That's where it starts. Get some practice. Be powerful. Create your own government. Govern yourself first, and master the art of self-government before you start telling other people how to live their lives. I'm pretty weary of other people telling me how I should govern myself when they can't even take care of themselves. They're not governing themselves. So, and we have to walk our talk. We have to have integrity for this vision for a new America. And integrity is that center in which things hold together. You know, when you don't have integrity, systems fall apart. It cannot hold, the center cannot hold without integrity. You know, that center. And it goes for human beings too. So America is a republic and a democracy. So what's the big argument about Democrats versus Republicans and all this nonsense? It's both. What are we arguing about? It had two different jurisdictions, and they were in a balance of powers, a tension. It was the tension to be able to keep them apart. And they are actually still separate jurisdictions. But some things have happened in the economic system and et cetera, which have altered things. When I said common law had disappeared, kind of went behind my back a little bit. That also has to do with because the nature of the monetary system changed in 1913 from a common law money system, gold and silver, to a fiat paper money substitute system called the Federal Reserve Note. So when that shift occurred, and then by 1933 with the first bankruptcy of the United States of America, where the Fed called the notes due, because Congress, you know what Congress will overspend itself and has been doing so since the dawn of time, well, at least since the dawn of the Federal Reserve. It's been spending more than it takes in every year and continually expanding government from 1% of GNP to 65% of GNP. And every time it does that, the Fed calls the note and confiscates a little more property from the American people. So in 1933 and 34, the first thing they confiscated was gold. We want payment in gold. So we went off the gold standard. And the paper was no longer guaranteed by gold. You couldn't go down to the bank and get gold for it any longer. And then in 1968, we went off the silver standard because the Fed called the note and said, we want all the silver. So where are we today? Well, the Fed is calling the note and they're saying, we want all the real estate. We want all the property and the land too. We're not satisfied. There's not enough for us yet. We want it all. And so we will do our little foreclosure game here, since we've indebted the nation up to its eyebrows and with no hope of recovery, given this economic paradigm that we're presently in. The only hope of recovery is the Jubilee year. And I postulate 2012 will be a Jubilee year and we will forgive all debt at all levels and get a fresh start. Because it's all a fiction anyway. It's all make-believe.
Oh.
And you have to believe that that exists and that you owe the money. And of course we sweat blood and tears sometimes over trying to manage that and keep our credit cards alive and keep our bank account floating and pay those bills every month and keep us on the treadmill. On that treadmill. So, restoring a republic for which it stands. We begin at the very smallest level, which is ourselves and our communities. I have some shocking news, which is maybe not so shocking to people here, but we don't really have a government. There isn't any constitutional government left. It's gone. All that exists is a public corporation. And then there are private corporations, which are chartered by the public corporation. And then we have a Federal Reserve Bank, which controls the money and finances for both the public and the private corporations. So the power structure is a very simple thing. Banks, big banks, central banks, public corporations, and private corporations. Where's the government? What happened to the government? I thought he was president of the government. There ain't no government. It's all corporations now. And so to restore the republic and to restore government, we've got a lot of work to do to lay some new foundations. So if you're going to ask me what kind of political affiliation I might be, I would say libertarian. I don't believe we should have no government. I believe we should have limited government. And all government should total no more than 10% of GNP. That's all of it. Local, county, et cetera, et cetera. state and federal. But that also requires, in order for that transition to occur, we've got well over probably 55% of the American population employed by the government now. So a majority